Moved on to Ferrum Phos part 2, and I'm just going to touch on a few things here. This is the good old salt, Ferrum Phos, a lot to do with the blood. And I personally love the subject of blood because of the affinities we have with this concept in Chinese medicine, which are extremely unique. And blood can get onto a very deep and esoteric level when we look at what actually blood is from a metaphysical point of view, as well as a physiological one as well. But this salt I find very, very one of the most important ones, really, because like I said in the first one, iron is very, very important for us. It's very important for our immune systems. And of course, with the way things are, a lot of medications will leach iron, funnily enough. Ones that are considered good for our immune system clearly aren't. And I don't need to state the obvious here, but it's interesting timing for doing this. We've just had a full moon in Pisces. Feels quite like most moons, quite strong, but it was quite pleasant. And now we're going through a Mercury retrograde in Virgo, which has a opposition to Neptune, which is a good old virus aspect, so we can see what's going on in the world. At the moment, they seem to be heating things up around this kind of issue, but not that I mean to be talking about the astro weather, because there's so many people who do this online. But Mercury retrograde in Virgo can give us a re-look or rethink, draw us back to thinking about our health, because obviously Virgo is the sign of health. But I find it interesting in the correlations or the sequence of the zodiac, we move from Aquarius to Pisces. Because in the last series I talked about natrium myrrh, and I talked about obviously the Aquarius being ruled by Uranus, which in my opinion has an rules electricity, things like this. And then we follow it from Aquarius to Pisces, which represents, and Pisces has a lot to do with blood. And I look at this kind of sequence uniquely in a way, because I look at Aquarius as chi and Pisces blood. So it's like this chi and blood connection in the sequence of signs it moves through, which I find fascinating, because there's a classical herb formula in Chinese medicine called Dangui Bu Xie Tang, which is to do with a herb, Huang Qi, astragalus, which is ruled by Aquarius, followed by a herb called Dangui, which is a blood tonic. So this concept of qi and blood working side by side, I find very, very interesting. And it's true, because blood does have that electric charge, and we need the electric charge in it from qi to circulate it. And so Ferrum Phos, excuse me, metaphysically has a lot to do with the spirit. And for instance, if we don't have enough of this this salt in our blood, then it's powerfully magnetic, this salt, which has a tremendous affinity for oxygen. So it's going to attract the spirit into us in this kind of incarnation level. So this is really, really important to understand, because in the depths of the human or earthly body, there must be an abundance of iron to be able to attract a sufficient spirit within our constitution, or enough to energize the atoms within us, so to speak. So in other words, if we don't have enough of this, we perish. And of course our consciousness perishes. Our psyche becomes oppressed, it becomes depressed. We can be easily feeling run down and tired. Now, so when we are depleted in this, And we can't really talk about the C word on here. I mean, there's two C words we probably can't talk about. But there's one of them is a lot to do with, obviously, there's a very, very important statement George W. Carey says in the chapter of iron that is about to do, so when the body becomes very deficient in it, when the fluid of the body becomes depleted in iron and the corpuscles, the body slowly suffocates and eventually starts to putrefy. And then we get extremely sick, right? Because the body becomes deoxygenated. And this is one of the main reasons he talked about this extensively in his book about in regards to cancer, because it's obviously when the cells get starved of oxygen, they cannot get oxygenated, because cancer obviously can't survive in a healthy oxygenated environment. So this is one person thing to consider. And then of course he combines it with the salt Kali Sulf, because Kali Sulf will help break up the stagnation which, so to speak, can cause a tumor. And when we look at these kind of subjects in Chinese medicine, because tumors and things like this are a lot to do with what they call phlegm and blood stasis. So the Kali Sulf will help break it up, and the oxygen, or the Ferrum Phos salt, will help oxygenate this on this kind of level. So I find this statement incredible, and he would actually say that it's one of the legitimate cures for this disease. And so the dosage and this kind of thing is one thing to consider. I'm not going to talk about this on the videos, because that takes a lot of required research to look into these kind of things when it comes to this stuff. But it's a very interesting way of looking at this, one of combating, say, a disease like this, which makes sense to me that Pisces and Piscean suns are very usually magnetic and sensitive and can really tune into atmospheric energies, and they can be very, very sensitive to chi and prana. So, and they tend to absorb things through osmosis. They make great magnetic healers, usually deeply compassionate people. But this salt is deeply burnt out in these kind of people as well. They have a very, very strong affinity for iron. And so there's just a number of things that this salt can do, a huge amount. And primarily, clinically, a lot of people have problems with energetic levels. A lot of people are deficient. A lot of people are run down. A lot of people now have a very depleted energy levels. And I'd say basically because their blood has been corrupted. And when that happens, it's very hard to clean and purify blood. And this is probably why in ancient Chinese, and this is why I resonate with these salts, because I think, having understanding the salts can help purify the blood. They help hold the blood at a certain frequency and a certain vibration. And then also medically as well, from a Chinese medical point of view, this is why bloodletting is very, very extremely important. When you understand the concept of blood and what it actually really does to the body, it's incredible. And I'm probably going to save that for my Patreon page, because I don't want to talk too medically on this channel, but it's important. So this salt is one of the ones, like all of them, but this one particularly is incredible for that level, and it's one of the main things to consider, because Piscean is very deep. It wants to transcend boundaries. it relates to understanding on a certain level because it's the ending of the cycle. The Pisces stands for the ending of all things, and the heel of the body is like the end of the body. This is why it was considered that Pisces rules the feet. So we tend to look at foot problems when we look at the, say, 12th house and this particular area of the chart. And it's very interesting because I'm going to share this experience with you because I had a very interesting experience with my feet at one stage, because for those of you who understand astrology, I'll talk about this because I had my progress Mars was in the 12th house, and I had a transiting the planet Uranus in my 12th, right on my progress Mars in this house, and I had a freak accident with my feet, which is interesting because Mars rules fire and heat. Uranus rules sudden change, and all of a sudden I had a freak accident where I burnt my foot really badly. I ended up in emergency, and I remember I had a look at my chart at that and thought, what the hell's going on here? And it just blew my mind when I saw that, because 12th house rules the feet. Uranus Mars can cause sudden accidents and problems with metal, actually, because Mars rules metal. And so I was burnt by a metal object. Just to cut a long story short. So it's interesting when these things happen. And the 12th house does have a lot to do with the feet. And I would say, people who suffer from plantar fasciitis are more the Piscean type. It's a water type disease. In Chinese medicine, you would look at the kidneys, and what's going on with the kidney energy, because the water element actually rules the feet from a Chinese medical point of view as well. But plantar fasciitis is another one that a lot of Piscean types can experience, and dosing up on iron and things like this is really, really important. So it's powerfully a magnetic salt that has a tremendous affinity for oxygen, which is going to brighten your spirit. When your blood has got adequate amounts, your Shen will appear in the face of diagnosis. What I talk about Shen, I mean spirit. You can see the difference in people when they have adequate levels of this. And I think most people are familiar with people with iron deficiencies. And this is getting back to that Aquarius and Piscean take, which I had, comparing it to chi and blood. It's the same thing as what George W. Carey was talking about in biblical literature, talking about water into wine, because Aquarius is the water bearer and the iron is the blood, or the Pisces is the blood. This is what he's talking about when Jesus was in there. I can't even remember the story around it, but there's some metaphor about changing water into wine. And this, to me, is that connection between chi and blood to give adequate life force. When you've got that perfect balance between chi and blood, you're extremely healthy. And this is why the ancient Chinese had the exercise therapy, qi gong, tai chi, these kind of things. So I just wanted to throw this one in about ferrum, because it's an amazing salt. And it's one everyone needs. As soon as it's the go-to salt for when you got a cold, flu, feeling run down, no energy. This is your main one. And on my Patreon page, I will be talking more about combinations with these kind of salts and really how to use them. So my next talk, we'll get right into, I think I'm going to talk more again about Ferrum Phos. We'll get right into the constellation of Aries. So thanks for listening.